Hello, everyone, and welcome to Molehill Mountain, episode 99. Andrew Eisen here, along with E. Zachary Knight,
Hello.
and special guest, Brittany Ferrendi. Hello, Brittany.
Hello,
Hi,
Brittany.
how you
Uh,
doing?
Hello.
Brittany is the director of this year's Kunkel Awards, the Society of Professional Journalists Awards, which recognize the excellence in video game journalism. She took over from Michael Koretsky, and the Kunkel Awards just finished up this week. And we invited Brittany back to talk all about them. So, hello, Brittany. Thanks for coming back to chat with us.
Thank you for
Yes.
having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to know that we didn't scare you off last time.
No, I could handle it, and I'm ready to handle it again now that the Kunkles this year have been all wrapped up.
Yeah.
So, broad overview. What did you think of your first year? How did it go?
I think it went pretty well. I think I was more anxious going in with like how I would be received because people didn't really know me. I wasn't a part of the gaming press beforehand. So people really, all they had to go on was like my Twitter, which was pretty barren at the time, and just some, social media things here and there. So I really had to like focus on building like how my reputation is, and I just decided to let's see how I do this year. Let's let my work speak for itself. And I would say that it went better than I anticipated. I had a really great time and I learned a lot.
Did you, as far as how you were received by, I suppose, whatever you would consider the audience for the Kunkel Awards, did you compare notes with Koretsky and see how this year compared to years past? Or even just your own observations?
So kind of, I guess, behind the scenes, I talked to Koretsky a lot about my reception compared to his reception. There's always a lot of naysayers and people who have criticisms about how they want the Kunkles to be run, and that happened with both me and with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I would say that neither you nor Koretsky were really known to at least an audience who's familiar with game journalism, because neither you nor Koretsky when the Kunkel Awards started anyway were known to the game journalism scene, I would say. Correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure if he wrote any like gaming journalism stories. I know that he's not a heavy gamer. I believe he plays like Age of Empires 2, and that's it. So I don't think he wrote a lot. And personally, I wrote a couple of stories here and there, but I wasn't like in the industry. I hadn't written for like any big name publications or any of that, and I didn't know anyone. I'm still kind of like learning people, but that's just because I'm now a part of the Kunkel. So this is the time where I meet people in the industry. But prior to that, I didn't know anything going in. I wasn't like a part of this community, and I didn't have that sort of reputation.
So, as far as you directing the awards this year, what would you say? Because you brought your own flavor and your own approach to it. You added the was it the college reward? Which category did you add?
It was the esports
The
coverage category.
esports ones. You added esports. You took away Koretsky's beloved worst example of game journalism. So what do you think worked and what do you think didn't?
Well, I wish that the esports category had more entries, and I feel like just because it was a new category, like people weren't like super receptive to it. As far as what worked and what didn't work in terms of the Kunkles as a whole, behind the scenes, my work with the judges, I feel that went really well. We went very consistent with this week we would dedicate to this category, this week we dedicated to that category. We were super consistent and everybody was on point, and I'm really glad that that had worked out. In terms of what didn't work out, I would just say that like the turnout wasn't super great this year. I think it's because a lot of people were apprehensive and they didn't know me, because Koretsky had built that reputation. So I would say that like going forward, I want to, make sure people, know who I am and that they can submit. And I want to just be on top of promoting it to whoever I can, being like, hey, do you do good journalism? Do you know someone who does? Go ahead and submit it, because you won't know if you will win until you give it a shot.
Okay, so other than, because I noticed that being somewhat of a theme throughout the blog posts for each of the award categories as the winners were announced, and that most of them, apparently with the exception of college journalism, you didn't receive as many entries as you might have liked otherwise. Um, Other than just be yourself if you decided to do it again, other than being a more known quantity in relation to the Kunkel Awards, uh, how do you plan to attract more attention to the Kunkel Awards and get more submissions to each of the categories?
Well, I do think that the majority of what I can do is just, yes, promote myself and promote the Kunkels. And it's not all about me, it's about the journalism, it's about all of that. So being able to put myself forward, doing the podcast with you was super helpful in promoting, doing the AMA on Kotaku in Action. I want to do more of that stuff. Outside of promoting myself, I'm super open to ideas. Like, I do want to reach out to people that are in the industry, people who have won this year, people who just entered this year, and seeing like what kind of interest I can garner.
Okay. What is, at least from your perspective, what's the interest in the awards looking like to you? Does it seem to be grow year over year from the that you've observed, or how do you think interest in the Kunkels is compared to years past, if that's something you can measure?
Well, like I said before, the turnout wasn't super great compared to the years beforehand. And I think it's because there was that huge shift in shifting to a new director and shifting away from one category towards another. So I think it's kind of like the period where it started out and it was rising and then things changed. And whenever something will change, like if a website updates or if like Snapchat updates, like people start to be less interested in it, they kind of go down. But I anticipate and I really, really hope that we will continue to go back up now that people have gotten to know how I'm running the Kunkels.
Cool.
All right.
So, let's see. So how would you say? What was your impression of the way? Certainly because the newness may have made some people apprehensive. Do you have a sense of the general reaction to the Kunkel Awards, not just from fans and audience, but also from award recipients?
It's been super mixed. As some people may know, like one of the first winners that we announced won first, second, and third place in a category, and he was super not into it. He called the Kunkels a despicable joke, and he just was not happy with it. He's the only one that I've had so far that had like a super negative reaction. A lot of the other winners were really grateful and really happy. They promoted it online, and it made me feel really good. I haven't reached out to every single winner yet, and I plan to, not just so they know that they won, but so I can hand out certificates. So I kind of have to see like what the rest of the people have to say about winning. Generally, I would say it's a super mixed bag. Like a lot of people that comment on the blog posts have like their own criticisms and how they think things should be run. And, you know, I kind of take their advice, or I at least listen to them and see what's possible and see what kind of like doesn't align with the way that it should be. But yeah, like very nice reactions, very not nice reactions, but that's a part of anything like this.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
From the award recipients that you have contacted, how many had actually heard of the Kunkel Awards before you contacted them to tell them they won?
I can't be super sure. I didn't ask them all. I can tell that the guy that had won first, second, and third had heard about it before. At least one or two other people that I had contacted had heard of the Kunkels, and the rest of them didn't specify whether or not they did. And I didn't ask, but that's actually a really good question. I will want to reach out to them and ask them.
So, we were talking a little bit about, yeah, again, for anyone watching who doesn't know, you were the director of the awards, not one of the judges. So you didn't read every single story because you were not a judge. But even so, what did you think of the judges' picks, and did you have your own personal favorites in any of the categories?
So first I'll explain, in year 2, I was a judge. I was a secret judge. And this previous year, year 3, I took over as director. So I didn't judge any of them. And I initially screened them all for making sure they were uploaded in the correct year, that they weren't opinions, that they didn't violate the rules. But I didn't want to read any of the entries before the judges looked at them because in the middle of their discussions, I didn't want to influence their opinions because it's not up to me who wins, it's up to them. So I tried to like space myself out from all of the entrants to a degree to make sure that I didn't influence them. I am happy with the way that they had judged because they looked at it objectively. They didn't think like, oh, I disagree with this guy's opinion. They were instead saying, hey, this guy has an opinion and he shouldn't put it in this story. Or this guy investigated, or this woman really got some really good quotes out of this person that they were interviewing. And that's just, it takes a lot of work to do that. And we admired that and we wanted to commend that. So I'm super happy with the way that it worked out.
Getting my own personal opinion here, one of the things I've always liked about the awards and continues into this year is the judge not just seeing who won, here's the best one, good, but hearing the judges discuss who won and why, because I always like to learn new things. And sometimes I get kind of frustrated because what we're reading is excerpts and a summation of what the judges said about a wide variety of different things. And I'm the kind of guy that's like, I want all of it. But, you know, you only have so much time in the day, I understand. But one of the things that I learned this year, I knew what an article lead was, but I had never heard of the nut before. That
that was a new term for me.
That was new terminology on me. So can you for anyone who hasn't read the blog, give our reader or viewers what is the lead and nut for you aspiring journos out there?
Yeah, so when I was getting into the journalism world and I was learning like how to pitch stories or how to submit drafts, my editors would always be like, submit your head, deck, lead, and nut. Head is the headline, the deck is like the subhead sort of thing, the lead is the intro sentence or paragraph that kind of tries to get the reader's like attention, like normally something that doesn't give away all of the information but sort of teases it so you're like, ooh, I want to read more. And then the nut will have usually the who, what, where, when, why, and how. And it tells you the most important information because when you're writing a story, you want to do like the inverted pyramid, put the most important information at the top. And then as you go through the story, you add in things that aren't as essential, but are good for the story, quotes and just like, you know, additional information. And for my blog posts, what I wanted to make sure that I did with each one was to kind of have like a lesson or a theme to accompany it. A lot of the categories, the theme kind of created itself organically as the judges were talking on Google Hangouts. And as I was listening in, like, I was like, hey, this is a common occurrence in all of these entries and in this winner and this winner and this winner. Let's talk about it and let's talk about why it was the case. Because as a director, my goal is to, you know, improve gaming journalism, and just teaching like lessons like this is super important to me.
Yeah, I've never taken a journalism class, but I did have English and writing classes in high school and such. And the way it was always explained to me was tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them. And I found it really fascinating that one of the judges said almost exactly that in a different way. I'm like, I learned something valuable in school after all. Huzzah!
Yeah, I can definitely see why that is important, because if you're gonna ask somebody to read your story, and this is kind of like with pretty much anything, in creative aspects, it's called the elevator pitch, where it's like you have 30 seconds to get somebody interested in your idea. How are you gonna tell it to them? And then once you grab their attention, then you go into the big meaty details of everything. And I guess that's what the lead and the nut is that it's that elevator pitch before you get into the big article and fill in all the details. So
yeah. For example, if I wanted to write an article about, hey, I'm going to be on a podcast with Andrew Eisen and Zachary Knight, the lead would probably be something like, the Kunkel director is going to speak publicly for the first time since the Kunkels have been concluded. And then that would be like, Brittany Ferrendi, Kunkel director Brittany Ferrendi will appear on Andrew Eisen's Molehill Mountain podcast with Zachary Knight at this date at this time, and then talk like maybe like a quote from Andrew, and then like some more little supplemental information. Like that's at like the basic level how like I would approach something like that.
One of the things I really liked and found fascinating about the write-ups for each of the winners was when one of the judges would put their editor cap on and start talking about what worked, but how it could be better. I don't remember the specifics, but there was one area where one of the judges was saying, this piece right here is gold and should have been moved all the way to the top. And I'd read that, and then I'd read the full story that one was being referred to, and I'd go, oh, okay, I see what they're saying. And I, being a writer myself, I've had editors, and it's an interesting. If you've never had an editor, it's a wonderful push-pull experience, because on the one hand, editors are butchers who don't understand your genius at all, and on the other hand, editors are incredibly valuable teachers that you can learn a ton from. So I've had editors where I'm super frustrated with what they're changing or cutting out or moving in my work. But even from the same editor, I'm like, actually that's correct, and I'm ashamed I didn't see that in the first place.
I'm glad that a lot of our judges are editors. One of the things I wanted to make sure we did a little bit differently this year was to not just say, I don't like this, but to explain why and how it could be better. I believe in previous years, Kretsky didn't exactly look for that. He was just sort of looking for why it didn't work and what, all of that stuff. But I really wanted to encourage all of the judges to say, like, how could this be fixed? How could this be changed? Because I want to make it like productive and constructive. And I just don't want to be like, this one is third place because it wasn't as good as first place. Instead, say something like, this story was third place because it didn't do this, this, and this. And if you want to be first place, then consider doing these things. I'm super, super glad that we have a team that not only has that history of being an editor, but can just converse and explain how to better things. And that story that you were talking about was, I believe, the Superman Returns story about like Superman's crotch, I think it was.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. That's right. He's like Superman's crotch goes up front because that gets you reading.
Yeah.
You don't bury that 5 paragraphs down.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that you'll probably get from the person that you're interviewing once you're like more deeper into the interview and more familiar with them and they're more comfortable with you. Then they start sort of like saying like the really good stuff, the stuff that you wouldn't get at the surface level if you had only talked to them for like a couple minutes and didn't get to that level with them. So like that juicy detail, like you said, it gets people interested and they want to read more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of juicy details, there was some lovely, delicious drama this year. We'd mentioned that the same journalist won first, second, and third place in one of the categories. Another category had no winners. So any fun little behind the scenes juicy details you can share with us?
Well, I will say, as you mentioned earlier, you can kind of tell when you're reading the blog post that the judges go back and forth a little bit. Behind the scenes, there are these full-on debates. Just, I wouldn't say it doesn't get like emotional or heated, but like they get into like some serious quarrels over like whether or not they should award this, or whether or not like, like meta journalism things as well. And there were a couple of occurrences where I would be sitting and taking notes. Another judge would be listening while these two judges would just go at it for like 10 or 15 minutes about a single story or about like a single just concept. And it was just like really interesting behind the scenes, like trying to like write everything down as they're arguing. And after one such debate, after our meeting had concluded, I got an email from one of them that was basically like, nobody's getting divorced. Like, we're not actually, angry at each other. And like, if you want us to cool it down for you, we will cool it down. Just say the word. And I said, hell no, I love it. I love that you guys are arguing about this. It shows that you really care. And it's just like, it's super juicy. And it's all in like, none of it is personal. It's all just about like the journalism and making sure that like the best stories are up top and whether or not, who deserves what. So I just love that from behind the scenes.
So the winners, I take it, were picked more. The judges spoke to each other and just in their discussions arrived at a consensus rather than voting on it.
Yeah. So generally speaking, how it would work is I would send them the list, the category for that week, and they would look through them. They would pick like their top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever they liked, and just whatever they felt was important to talk about, even if they didn't feel like it was a winner, just something that they would want to discuss. So I would take their lists, I would put it together. If both of them agreed on like talking about a specific one, or if they all agreed on talking about one, I would note that separately. And then once we started our meeting, I would have them, we would just go down the list, get all of their like opinions, see what they think, and just sort of like talk our way into a conclusion that way.
You should save all those discussions and then just disguise all the voices and faces and release them just for fun. Or maybe
I took notes. But yeah.
Well, for next year, what you do is you record the discussions, and then in the weeks leading up to the winners' announcements, you release selectively edited judge discussions just to garner interest and go, oh my God, what are they fighting about? I must tune in for the announcements. That'd be awesome.
That would be really funny. Oh, and another thing I want to say is, like I said earlier, some of them would only pick like 1 or 2 tops, or in the case where nobody won, one of the judges was like, I don't pick any of them, I don't endorse any of these, and we talked about that instead of talking about what winners they liked, and we tried to figure out what kind of conclusion to go to, and that's ultimately what we chose.
Yeah.
Brian Gillis in the chat chimes in that I made it, and the first 2 words I heard in this podcast were Superman's crotch. Yeah, Brian, you dropped in at just the right time.
Yeah.
It's the lead. It got him interested.
And you're still here, right, Brian? that illustrates the point.
Yeah.
One takeaway I got from reading all of the blog posts in the award winners discussions, which is a little difficult to attribute, and it may be the same judge because total.
I'm sorry, you cut off?
Yeah, you kind of cut in and out there. I think we're losing Andrew to the pod people.
Oh, no.
Well, while he's away, Allie, I'm trying to think of what kind of stuff I wanted to ask you about, and I've had a really busy couple of days, and so I haven't had a whole lot of time. But yeah, I do find the okay. So for everybody, we're probably going to get into specifics with each of these categories. But man, that how many entries did you get in the news, video, and streaming category? That's the one that didn't win. Nobody won. How many entries were there?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I might have written it in the blog post. I feel like it was between like 10 and 20, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. I had to like disqualify some of them ahead of time because it's really tough to like submit for the news category because not a lot of people understand the difference between news, feature, and opinion. So sometimes there would be a story that was not timely, was not like breaking news. It was just like, like a feature story. So I would eliminate the ones that were like super obvious, and then the judges would eliminate the rest. And the opinion ones obviously did not have a place in news reporting. So the entries was not as big of a number as it had like originally meant to be. So for categories like that, I'm taking I'm going to be writing a blog post. It'll come up soon, maybe in the next couple weeks, that will explain the difference between news, opinion, and feature, just so maybe non-journalists can understand for when they submit next year. So maybe just journalists can, I don't know, brush up on their differences. But that's kind of like how my approach is to sort of fixing that issue, because it happened a couple of times where things would be submitted to the wrong categories.
Okay, so just if you can describe it in like a nutshell, what is the key difference between a news story and a feature story? Because I think opinion is probably pretty different enough that most people would understand that, but a feature and a news story, describe the difference in a nutshell for us.
In a nutshell, news is new. It's timely. It'll be like a recent event, something that has just happened, whether, it's this game came out or we just uncovered that this publisher is like mistreating workers, anything like that. A feature doesn't have a specific date that it needs to be released. It can come out at almost any time and still be relevant. It's usually more of a human element, like it might be about like a specific person who created a video game or just anything of the sort. Like I believe there was a story about like female esports players. That's more featurey. And you said that opinion should be super obvious, but it's not super obvious. Which is kind of like sad.
Wait, is that your opinion or is that a fact?
That's my opinion. People put opinions in news stories and people put opinions in feature stories, and it's a very big problem because if you're presenting your opinion as fact, then you are misconstruing facts. You are making them appear objective when they are not. So some feature stories and some news stories will put opinions in them, and I am super careful, and the judges are super careful to like look at that and make sure that it's not, awarded unfairly.
Okay. All right. Well, that does make sense. I guess when I'm thinking opinion being separate, I'm thinking like an editorial, but yeah, I can see how, if somebody's reporting something and they inject their opinion, that can sully the rest of the news story, and yeah, that could cause a lot of problems in especially in awards category. So,
yes.
Okay. And Andrew is back with us now.
My internet just blinked out. Although it's interesting because I'm hosting the show, meaning that I launched the Google Hangout from my PC locally, and the show continued without me, which I didn't realize. I thought I was going to have to recall the entire show and invite you guys again.
About that. I thought that it would be cut off and that we were just talking to nobody for the last 5 minutes. But I was like, whatever, let's just wing it just in case.
The live thing was still going, so I'm just like, well, we still have a show. So.
Cool.
I did last week without Andrew. I can do it again. So what I was trying to ask before the internet told me no was one pet peeve, faux pas, one might call it, that I noticed from the judges was stop talking about yourself. You, the author of this piece, stop talking about yourself. Nobody cares. I don't know, since all but one of the judges are anonymous, I don't know if it was the same person hammering on this every time, or if it was a repeated problem that you were seeing with your submissions. But I also found it interesting that there was one case where one of the judges said, we're always talking about this. We don't care about you. It's not about you. But in this one specific case, it kind of works for this reason. Can you talk a little bit about that point of view where, as a journalist, what you're writing is not about you, and you should take yourself out of the work?
Yeah, so it's exactly what you said. Like, if you're writing a story about this person, you don't want to talk about yourselves because it's taking away from the subject that you're talking about. You don't want to make it personal. It kind of tiptoes the line with opinion piece where, you're inserting your opinion into it. If you're inserting yourself into a story, then it literally just takes away the spotlight from what you're talking about, and it's less relevant. If you're talking about this person, but you just keep mentioning yourself, it's not telling the reader what they want to know. They don't want to know what you ate for breakfast or that it was raining on your way to the interview. They want to know like the core of the interview. They want to know what you spoke about. They want to know about what this person had to say. If you want to write
about Superman's crotch.
Yeah. If you want to write about yourself, that's cool, I guess, but that's a column. If you want to write about someone else or about some particular subject, you want to dedicate your time to that subject, and you want to dedicate your readers' time to it. Otherwise, you're wasting everybody's time by talking about something that they're not interested in. Sometimes it does work. I don't remember the specific instance. If you can recall the story, that's great. But there are some times that you can make it work by sort of leading in to something interesting. You just have to be super careful about it. It's something more along the lines of that once you're more experienced with writing in that sort of way, you can do it. But if you just try to do it right off the bat, you can lose focus on your story.
Mm-hmm. I remember a bit of a tangent here, but I remember what's his name? Colin Campbell, who writes over at Polygon right now, wrote a piece on Rock Band 4 for Polygon year 2, year 3. I have no concept of time. It was at some point in the past. He wrote a Rock Band 4 article, which apparently was originally going to start out as some type of preview for Rock Band 4, but turned into something different because he was at some who did Rock Band? Was that Activision? Or no, that was Guitar Hero. It was Harmonix?
Harmonix.
Well, whoever was throwing one of those journalist parties where they invite journalists and give them booze and put them up in hotels and stuff to review their games. And Colin was there, and he's like, I am so not into this scene. I don't know what the hell is going on. I don't like the music. I don't like the game. And so the piece ended up not being a preview. It ended up being Colin's experience at the party, which a lot of people really hated. That particular article at Polygon got a lot of backlash from readers, and I think partially because it was originally filed wrong as a Rock Band preview, and then it was changed to opinion. I think it just got filed wrong in the first place.
Yeah.
Personally, I liked the article because I just found his older curmudgeonly experience with them damn young kids' music really kind of fascinating to read. But it was interesting seeing a lot of other outcry saying, we don't care about you, Colin. We want to hear about the game.
Yeah. I don't know if this made it to the final cut, but that was one of the articles that was submitted to the Kunkels last year when I was an anonymous judge. And I remember reading that story very specifically. And it's so funny that you bring that up because that was my biggest, I just did not like that story. And I just remember it so vividly because he was just talking about, oh, I don't like this. I don't like parties. We're on the rooftop. And I was just like, stop. People want to hear about the game. People want to hear about this thing that, not a lot of people get to do that. Not a lot of people get to hang out on the rooftop of a very high building and play a game before anybody else does. And he was just kind of talking about himself and not about the game. And I'm so glad that you brought that up. And I wonder if my comments about it hadn't been published last year.
Wait a minute. Didn't that win worst article last year?
Probably.
Possibly. I'd have to look that up. But yeah.
And I can totally see why it would win, but I have to admit, I actually liked the article because it was, now granted, when I got to it, it had been retitled and refiled to reflect what it was, which was definitely not a preview for a video game.
Yeah.
So if it had been sold to me as a preview for Rock Band 4, I probably would have been a bit put off. But by the time I got to it, it was Colin's adventures at a rooftop video game party or something that he didn't want to go to or write about. So
kind of interesting why he would go to something like that if he didn't want to go. He was the only one available. I don't know.
It's like, why did we send Colin? Colin's like, I don't know. And full disclosure, if it's important, Colin has edited my stuff before at IGN, so don't know if anyone cares, but there you go. Jack Kamen in the chat says Andrew's a major nerd, LMAO. Jack is right.
I think we're all major nerds here.
Yeah. So,
but,
Zachary.
I was just gonna say that I think those kind of stories can be fun, but I think it's just if it's sold right, it could be. But yeah, I can totally see myself in his shoes, because I used to go to game tournaments and when I was with the ECA, and and then back at that time, I had considered getting into game journalism and stuff, and these game tournaments I was just like totally bored at. And I'm like, I wouldn't be able to write about this kind of stuff because none of the games interest me and I suck at all of them, and I wouldn't know the first thing on how to properly report on what is going on here. And I think that's a big issue with esports a lot of times too, like with reporting and everything, is that you have to actually understand the whole esports scene in order to actually write about it. But luckily we're actually getting to a point where people are dedicated to that scene, so which reflects in the addition of the esports category in this year's Kunkel. So but kind of a weird segue there, but yeah.
Speaking of that esports category, I realized that in my description of the category, I said, oh, even ESPN is covering esports. And then I didn't anticipate that ESPN would submit entries, or someone would submit ESPN to that category. I'm like, oh, wow, I really should have thought about how I approach this, because now I'm talking about ESPN in the description, and whoop, there
they are. Yeah. So, but I guess just in that case, now, did you consider for these awards? As a body, were you guys considering major news outlets reporting, or is this specifically just games journalism reporting?
So you cut out a little bit, but I think you were asking, like, does it matter who submits, whether it's a big publication or a small one?
Yeah. Does it matter, like, if it's ESPN or BBC or Fox News or whatever? If they covered it and somebody submitted that article, would that article be considered, or is this specifically for dedicated games journalism?
Well, yes, it would be considered, and no, we wouldn't turn away a outlet for submitting a story as long as it's relevant. It's always been about the journalism itself, the articles. It's not about who publishes them. It would be unfair to do so. Rolling Stone submitted to the college category, and we allowed it because the writer was a PhD, or he was working on his PhD. ESPN did submit. I don't remember whether or not they won, but they were an entry. I make sure, and I make sure that the judges don't boot a particular entry because of the publication that it came from. The goal at the end of the day is to highlight quality video game journalism and show how it can improve. And whether it's from an indie little publication or from I don't know, Fox News, it should be highlighted.
Okay.
Speaking of the college category, another one of the fun things to read about was that 50 stories were submitted, and one of the judges said, "Stop, please stop." Were these was the same story submitted 50 times, or was it 50 different stories? And were these 50? Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, for the most part, it was all 50 different stories. There were a couple of duplicates here and there, and they ranged. Some of them were very short videos, some of them were long videos. Some of them were news briefs, features, opinions, game reviews. Basically, everything that could have been submitted was submitted. And a lot of them just didn't hit the mark in terms of criteria. And since there were so many, I tried to make it a little bit easier for the judges by eliminating ones that I knew they weren't going to go for, specifically ones that were just opinion, or ones that would have like a single source and just have like a very short, like 4 paragraphs or 3 paragraphs. But they were in complete range between like who submitted it, like, you know, who the journalist was and what type of content it was. It was just a lot to cut through it. Even with me cutting down some, I didn't want to dive too deep into it. I didn't want to make decisions for them, so I just had cut out the ones that were like just obvious. No, they won't want like this. They won't like that. Even with that, there were a lot of the 50 that remained, and they were just like, just stop. It's a really good lesson, and I'm glad that it happened, because I can talk about it and I could say, like, it's good. I encourage you to submit entries. I encourage you to submit as many as you want, but be precise about it and make sure that you're putting your best work forward. Not just, you know, let's cast a wide net.
Everything I wrote this year.
See what we can catch. Just put in the stuff that you think deserves to be awarded. That way we can focus on what's good.
Okay. So do you think that this particular category got so many entries because it's a lot of college kids who are trying to get that award on their resume for when they're looking for a job?
I think it's potentially that. I think it's also because it's very easy to reach out to colleges and college newsrooms and say, hey, if you have video game stuff, submit it. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that a lot of college students are gamers. And a lot of them want to get into the games industry, or they just like to write about it. Like when I was at my school paper at the University Press, I wrote about gaming stories. So it's easier to just reach out to colleges and be like, hey, we have an awards and there's a specific college category. Reach out to your students. It's more accessible for that purpose.
So these 50 stories were representative of a variety of different writers. It wasn't the same writer on all of them, was it?
No, it was a range of different writers. I couldn't tell you how many.
I was just wondering if it was just one dude who's like, everything I wrote is gold.
I don't know if it was just each individual writer submitting stories, or if it was like an advisor submitting for them, or an editor, or fans. I'm not sure. I couldn't tell where they came from, but it was a lot. And I think some of the duplicates were that multiple people were submitting. So yeah.
Okay.
So earlier in the show, we talked about the general reaction to the Kunkel Awards. Some positive, some negative. I noticed, at least in the blog post comments and some of the stuff in the Reddit AMA, seems to be the comments in question seem to be coming from a place that assumes you and the awards in general are acting in bad faith. So how do you personally approach crafting a response to someone who appears to assume the worst of you?
Yeah, so I did get a lot of comments. Some of them were just criticism. Some of them believed that I was in bad faith. I understand I can't do a lot to change the minds of people that believe that I am behaving in bad faith. All I can do is sort of put my best foot forward, handle things how I want to handle things, and explain why I do so. If I can't change that person's mind, that's okay. I still want to be true to myself. So when it comes to crafting a response to them, it's obvious that I don't want to make it personal because it's not a personal thing. It's just a matter of, sticking to my guns, sticking to how I believe things should be run, explaining it. And most of the time when I am crafting a response to someone who believes that I am not behaving on good faith, is not to write to change their minds, but to change the minds of people who are reading, and maybe won't go as far as to comment, but to have their own idea and form their own opinions. I want to solidify my stance and tell them how I approach things and how I want the Kunkels to be run. So maybe I won't change the mind of that person that's, stuck in their negative mindset, but maybe someone who's like on the fence is like, I like the way that she talks and I like the way that she handles things, and I don't think it's going to be as bad as this person says.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm looking at some of these comments, and it's kind
don't do that. Never look at the comments.
No, you never read the comments, but it is kind of interesting that we've got a set of comments that are from people who consider the Kunkel Awards to be the games journalists, doing this so that they can pat themselves on the back for such a good job. And then you have another group of people that are looking at the Kunkels as a response from Gamergate, and it's basically Gamergate had forced this to happen, and that's why it shouldn't be trusted. It's just, it's really interesting to see that kind of dichotomy in response to this.
That was, speaking of that I found kind of a very odd piece of history revising, the whole theory that Gamergate forced the Kunkel Awards into being or created the Kunkel Awards itself.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that started, but
I can't speak to that because I wasn't a part of the Kunkels when it started. I'm pretty sure I was in college still choosing my major when Gamergate happened. When I talked to Kresge about it, he also thought it was interesting that one side thought that it was a circle jerk, that the other side thought that Gamergate created the Kunkels. And ultimately Kresge created the Kunkels, and he wasn't affiliated with either part, and it was from SPJ.
Basically, he saw a need to provide constructive criticism towards games journalism and give them a goal to shoot for. It's like, here's, show us your best work. We'll see what we think, and maybe over the next few years, you guys can improve.
Gaming journalism is different from regular journalism, I've observed, in the way that it's handled, and I'm not sure if it's because gaming journalists come from a different sort of background than regular journalists. Like, maybe not all of them take journalism classes and just want to start doing journalism and then going into games journalism, or if they're just gamers who want to write about video games. I'm not exactly sure. But I believe the purpose of the Kunkels when it started was to kind of raise gaming journalism to the standard of, all other types of journalism. Yeah. And that's sort of what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, because, I think for a lot of games journalists, it comes from they have a passion for this particular industry, and then they want to write about it, and they start doing it. Andrew and I, neither one of us have a journalism background, but we've both written in the past. I did a little bit of time for Tech Dirt, and Andrew wrote for IGN, but we never had a journalism background. I think that's happens a lot in the games journalism industry, and I honestly couldn't tell you how many of them, how many writers out there actually have a journalism background. So, but
yeah, that's why when I try to do the blog posts, I do want to reinforce the fundamentals, and I want the judges to reinforce the fundamentals of journalism. That way, if you didn't grow up taking journalism classes, or if you didn't go to take, to major in journalism in college, that you still get that sort of learning experience, even if it's, however far you are in your journalism career. If you're not a journalism student or you're not a journalist, that you can still learn the basics of it, the standards.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, I'm bothering the chat. So I wanted you to speak on the surprise special recognition award, which seemed to be an impromptu thing, which you can talk about. But I thought the funniest thing is kind of how that award came to be, which was Koretsky disqualifying his own submission for a category that he created. So tell us a bit about that.
So when I first saw that he had submitted, I thought it was really interesting, and I had to keep checking the category rules, and I'm like, Koretsky should know better. He wrote that the maximum was 3, and he submitted a 12 series. So I wanted to make sure that I showed that to the judges. Like, obviously it was disqualified, but I wanted them to see, hey, the previous director that did this, and this is how it went about. And they looked at the series and they were like, yeah, Koretsky messed up, but this is also like a really amazing thing, and I don't think we should disqualify the journalist or the journalism just because Koretsky, the submitter, had messed it up. So we kind of decided, like, should we do like its own separate award? Obviously, like, we shouldn't make it win a category that it's not qualified to win, so it shouldn't win what it was submitted to. But maybe we should do something a little special, a little extra. And I had talked to Koretsky about it. I'm like, hey, you messed up. So behind the scenes, we were talking about it, and there was just a lot of discussion about how Koretsky had messed up, and we were kind of like jabbing at him about it. And there were, behind the scenes,
you didn't just jab at him behind the scenes. That's in the write-up.
Yep. You jabbed at him for the entire world to see here.
Yes, and I had made him aware, like, hey, we're gonna point out that you had done this, and he's like, hit me with your best shot, like, I dare you to post this and show everybody that you're jabbing at me. And we're like, okay, let's do it. And this is like maybe not even as bad as how it was behind the scenes, but it was all in jest. None of it was personal. It was just, it worked out in a way that was just really, really fun. And I'm glad that we can recognize this work, because it was a huge enterprise. Like, someone going to Cuba and writing all of these stories, like, it had to be awarded. And even if it wasn't like planned from the beginning, it was kind of cool that we could do like, surprise, here's another award, and congratulations for doing this amazing thing. Like, you deserve this.
So so in response to this, is that are you guys going to be reconsidering the hard three-piece rule for that category, or is that something you're gonna keep for brevity's sake, I guess?
We haven't talked about opening up beyond 3, and I think the reason that we do that is because the judges are volunteers. They don't have time to devote to reading like 58-piece series. But we did consider having a permanent category of this sort of enterprise, like this huge undertaking sort of thing, as its own thing. And I didn't want to decide that permanently for this year, like, oh, this is the first of many. I want to sort of think about whether or not we'd have like a lot of entries for that sort of thing. Like, I want to look at the logistics, see if that's possible, and consider doing it in the future. Like, say each year we'll have like a special enterprise award. I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure if I want to add more categories. I don't know what kind of categories I want those to be. So that's just kind of like, now that this year's Kunkel Awards are over, I want to see, like, should we expand? Should we stay how it is? If we're not getting that many entries this year, do we want to spread them even more out? It's a possibility. I won't want to say anything for sure yet, but who knows?
Yeah. So it was so this year you guys got rid of the terrible writing award. I forget the specific name of that.
Was there, of the year.
Yeah, the worst story of the year. Was there any submission that you felt would have been deserving of that award had you kept it?
I can't say for sure. I mean, there were some that were disqualified right off the bat for being opinion stories, but being labeled as news. I would see maybe some of those put into at least nominated for that category. But I don't know. I didn't look at them and be like, oh, that should be in this in this worst story category, because I didn't think about that category anymore. I just wanted to focus on the ones that we did have.
At least nothing so bad that your judges campaigned to bring that category back.
Yeah, I didn't see like another sort of rock band story that jumped out to me.
I think one of the things I liked about the what won for the special recognition category was something we've touched on in our discussion here, is a story that talks about something that the audience doesn't know that they want to know about. I mean, you want to know about what's going on in the esports scene. You want to know about Rock Band 4 or whatever, but you probably didn't know you'd be interested in what's going on in Cuba. You probably weren't thinking about Cuba. And that's, I think, one of the great things about that piece is not only is it just incredibly well written and well researched, and a lot of time and effort went into it, but it's something I would have never thought to go look at myself.
Yeah,
and I think that's a good quality of any piece of journalism too.
I think it's really cool that gaming journalism can get to the point where you're not just writing about video games, and it's not just about gaming journalism in itself. You're writing about gaming journalism in the context of different countries, like gaming journalism in the context of Cuba, and how Cuban gamers will, what kind of troubles that they face, or writing about video game journalism in the context of healthcare, which was another winner. You can write about, in normal journalism, regular journalism, not normal journalism, you can write about how this is affected by this. And if you can bring video game journalism to that sort of level where, oh, it's about journalism and Cuba, or journalism and healthcare, like what else can you write about that we didn't know was a thing until you brought attention to it? There is a whole wealth of things that I can't even comprehend, probably, that you can write about video game journalism that hasn't been written about before, and I want to see more of that. I definitely want to see more of that submitted to the Kunkels, but just like in general, having that type of journalism is just amazing.
Okay.
All right, so chat is getting steamed. All right, so that's all the questions I had. Zachary, did you have anything else?
I think we kind of covered everything. I was mostly flying off the seat of my pants here with my questions, just because I didn't have a lot of time this week to prepare anything specific. But flying from the seat of my pants, not off the seat of my pants.
I was flying by the seat of my pants, and then I fell off and plummeted back to the earth.
Yeah.
So. Okay, and we kept it to an hour. Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yes, Brittany, thank you very much for joining us again on the show to talk about the Kunkel Awards, and congratulations on your first year. I think it was successful. Yeah. I enjoyed reading the blog posts and the various winners.
Thank you, and thank you guys so much for having me again. Thank you for having me the first time. It's really cool that I'm able to have this sort of discussion.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, well, we look forward to seeing where the Kunkels go in year 4. Where should people keep their eyeballs trained to learn more about future Kunkel goodness?
Well, I will always, write the blog posts as they come up. You can always check the Kunkel blog site. You can also reach out to me on Twitter, or you can just look at what I type on Twitter, because if I make a blog post, I will tweet it out. Or if I'm going to be on a podcast like this, I will tweet it out. Same thing as, when I was on the AMA. I try to make sure that, as things are happening, I will promote it on my social media. My Twitter is at bferrendi, BFERRENDI. My first initial and last name. Yeah.
All right. Zachary, anything you'd like to plug before we leave?
All right. You can follow me on Twitter at Easy Night, where I talk about gaming, politics, and other stuff. You can follow my game development work at DK_gaming and DivineKnightGaming.com. And if you're interested in the Oklahoma game development scene, you can check out OK Game Devs on Twitter and OKGameDev.com.
I'm sorry, I'm reading the chat. Let me address something specific. Mr. Sticky, whether any of your stuff was any more or less rude than anything Koretsky may or may not have said, Koretsky is not in the chat tonight. So, so when I say you're being profane and rude, I'm talking about your comments in the chat. So, but anyway, as for myself, Andrew Eisen, EISEN, plug it into YouTube and you get my YouTube videos, and follow me on Twitter at Andrew Eisen. And that is Journos Can't Handle Criticism, period.
Oh, God.
Now, is that an opinion or a fact? All right, y'all. We are at it here. Have a lovely week, and we will see you next Saturday for episode 100. Oh, Zachary, I guess we better do something special because it's episode 100.
Yeah.
I'm
sure we'll figure something out.
Yeah, we've got a week, so we'll put our minds to it. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. See you next time. Bye-bye.
All right. See ya.
Bye.